Greetings, loyal listeners. This is Brian Friedenborg, International Affairs, Development, Public Policy Professional, and freelance writer, journalist, consultant, historian. And tonight, or today, depending on where you are in the world, is either April 12th or April 13th, 2016. And tonight, today, whatever time it is for you, we've got another exciting podcast show for you discussing the American elections, because even if you live half a world away, yes, America might still screw some things up for you. Just kidding, we try, but we often do screw up. Anyway, so there's a lot going on in the election, contests going on in the United States. We've got our two parties, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, the two main parties anyway. The other parties have almost completely negligible results and support election to election, except there is one exception. We will get into that in a minute, but it's interesting. We've got way more chaos in this cycle when you factor in the situation with both sides than we've had in a very long time. And frankly, either party's contest would be a phenomenally unique, interesting, novel story. But when you add the two together, it's just ridiculous. But even on their own, we'd have more chaos, and at least if we're looking at the Democratic race, more competition, certainly than we've had in on average. It was a lot closer between Obama and Clinton, to be honest. But still, Obama and Clinton, Obama wasn't a self-declared socialist, and Bernie Sanders is. So this is quite an interesting time that we are experiencing. So let's start with the Republicans here, though, and go into detail there first. Right now, it's down to 3 people. Unless, of course, you're one of those people who can't wait for a contested convention and thinks Paul Ryan's going to magically come in and rescue the Republican Party from the horrible, thorny, spiky bed it's made for itself. And Paul Ryan made clear today, and I at this point really do take him at his word, that he is not going to be involved in this process as a candidate in any way. That he will not accept a nomination, nor is he seeking it from the Republican Party. And there are a number of other people who could possibly be nominated in a very strange, screwy way with the convention process for the Republicans. But right now, we've got 3 main candidates. We've got Donald Trump, who has way more delegates than anybody else, and he's the only candidate who could actually get enough delegates, 1,237, which is a majority, just over 50% of all the delegates that are at stake. And if he gets that many delegates before the convention, then it will just be a formality. The first ballot will be held. He will receive the nomination. That's going to be that. However, you also have 2 other candidates right now. Ted Cruz, who is in second place, and John Kasich, who's pretty far behind Ted Cruz. But Ted Cruz is also pretty far behind Donald Trump, let's remember. And they're hoping there's going to be a contested convention, or an open convention, meaning Donald Trump doesn't get 50.0% or higher of the delegates. And in that situation, that means there's not going to be a nominee on the first ballot. And then all of the delegates that are bound by the rules to have voted for Donald Trump because he won the most votes in these different states, a lot of them are free on the second round of voting, because it's not just whoever has the most delegates. You have to have a majority of all the available delegates. A number of these delegates, a large number actually, are free to vote for anybody they want, more or less. Sometimes there's some rules where it has to be maybe certain of the candidates that got over a certain threshold of votes or won a certain threshold of contests by a certain number of people. But basically, it gets much more interesting on the second or third round even. In the third round, even more people are free to vote, not for the people who their state has selected, which doesn't sound very democratic, but it's also a way of resolving a deadlock. Because if they were all bound to vote the way they were and someone didn't have a majority, if they were all bound to vote the way they were assigned, but someone didn't have a majority, then there would never be a nominee. So anyway, under the rules that the nominee has to have a majority, not just the most delegates. So there's all this talk because Donald Trump hates the establishment hates him. They don't want him to be their nominee. There's a lot of voters out there who have not selected Trump. Earlier in the contest, he was winning states, many states with about 35% of the vote, 36, 37. But that started to get better for him as time has gone on. And there's a tremendous amount of rancor, a huge divide between Trump supporters and the people who are not voting for Trump and the forces backing them. And there's all this talk that under this situation where Trump gets very close to the number he needs but doesn't quite get there for that first ballot, because a combination of delegates going to Ted Cruz and John Kasich prevent him from getting that required number, that the party would find a way, cut some deals. There'd be some wheeling and dealing, back rooms, cigar-filled, whiskey-filled, at least in this fantasy of how we think it happens and how it definitely used to happen. There'd be some deal, some process that would deny Trump the nomination and award it to Cruz or to John Kasich or to some other mystery person, because once that first ballot fails, there's a whole lot of crazy possibilities. Literally, I could be there at the convention and I could be nominated. There's certain points where there's no rules about who would be nominated. So anyway, actually, technically I couldn't because I'm not old enough under the Constitution. I think you have to be 35 and I'm 34. Actually, yeah, no, I won't be 35 at that point. So anyway, there's all this talk and all the conventional wisdom, pardon the pun, all the conventional wisdom is that the party hates Trump and they'll do whatever they can to stop him at the convention. And I think this conventional wisdom is wrong. And not just wrong, but obviously wrong for a number of reasons. I think they're playing a bluff. I think what they're trying to do is drum up all this anti-Trump support so that a lot more delegates will be awarded to either Kasich or to Cruz, so that Trump will be far enough away from that 1,237 delegate margin. Maybe he'll be 200 delegates short. Maybe he'll be 300 delegates short. Again, I think this is their thinking. That somehow people magically start waking up and seeing Trump for who he really is and stop voting for him. And that he won't be that close, and that there'll be enough of a margin that it'll be much more justifiable for them to move to deny him the nomination. However, I think that's incredibly wishful thinking. If you look at what's about to happen now, before California, and obviously one of the biggest states in the country, New York is voting in a few days, a little over a week. And Trump is way up with a week to go. And unlike the Democrats, there's no debate. Not a whole lot's going to change the trends that are now happening in New York, where Cruz was kind of in number 2, but he's falling down, and he's fallen to number 3. Kasich is number 2, a little bit ahead of Cruz, but hovering right around 20%. And they've been going down. And Trump has been going up. First it was the high 40s a couple weeks ago. Now it's mid-50s, up to 60% of the vote. And here's the thing. In New York State, it's proportional. But there's a 20% threshold. And right now, Kasich's hovering right around 20, a little bit above or below, depending on the poll. Cruz is sunk below 20. Cruz is looking at getting shut out of delegates. And before California votes, New York is by far the most delegates coming up. Maybe by far is a little strong. Pennsylvania's got a lot. But anyway, Cruz might get 0 delegates from this process. Kasich, could get some delegates, but if he doesn't get above 20%, he could get shut out, meaning Trump could get almost 100 delegates just from New York alone. And there's other states voting soon, like Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Maryland. Those are all states where Trump is doing very well and should win by large margins, large double-digit, 20-plus point margins, which is where the polls have him now. And when it comes to primaries, most of the time, in states favorable to Trump, the polling is showing itself to be pretty accurate. Wisconsin's a little wacky. Michigan was wacky for the Democrats. But yeah, so it's kind of hard to see Cruz really gaining steam now, because all those states that were going to be really favorable to him, except for a few really small ones way out west, like North Dakota and Montana, stuff like that, okay? But almost all, we're really down to the last tier of states here. I shouldn't say last tier, but last group. And once all the delegates from Pennsylvania, Maryland, Connecticut, Delaware, New York, obviously, are awarded, West Virginia's coming up, I think not too long after that. Maybe it's early May. So we'll check that. But yeah, that's a lot of delegates. And until California votes, where Trump is also up, that's a lot of delegates. And who's going to have all the momentum and most of the press coverage coming at that point? Yes, by the way, Nebraska and West Virginia, same day, early May 10th. But, Cruz pulled off an upset in Wisconsin. Maybe not upset, but he outperformed what he was supposed to do, and Trump underperformed, but still did pretty well, actually. But I feel like that's, okay, maybe Indiana coming up, but honestly, once Trump dominates big states like New York, Pennsylvania, fairly big states also like Maryland, all within the span of about a week period, that's going to be a lot of momentum and a lot of delegates. And especially if Cruz is embarrassed to the point that he gets no delegates from New York. Out of 95, or what if he gets a couple? But seriously, if he gets 0 out of 95 delegates, that is not going to help him. And as I've speculated, I shouldn't even say speculated, my research has indicated Kasich has a shot to, if anyone's going to do it, and again, it's a very small, at this point, it's not possible. But what Kasich can do is maybe overtake Cruz, or at least come close to him. He's going to get a lot more delegates in some of these states, the bigger ones, Pennsylvania, almost certainly New York right now, the way things are going. He's going to get a bit of a bounce and momentum from the anti-Trump forces. So instead of Cruz getting much closer to Trump and really looking like a viable alternative, his weaknesses in his weakest part of the country, the Northeast now, are going to be shown. Kasich's going to look better. He'll have more momentum going into California. So, it'll be interesting. But again, here's where I'm coming from. The Republican Party's not stupid, neither are the delegates. There's all these reporting going on. Oh, the delegates are loyal party activists who don't like Trump and they're going to favor these other people. But when it comes down to it, these delegates are people that want to have a future in Republican politics. And they're mainly local grassroots people who are going to have to go back to their neighbors and their fellow party activists and the people who voted in their states. And in the states that overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump, if they desert Trump on the second or third ballot, that's something these people will remember. And it's going to be hard for them to have a future in politics, having just obliterated the will of the voters and ignored it and just stomped on it, basically. And I'm not terribly buying into that idea that they're just going to flout the will of the voters. That's one thing. But the other reasons, and I went into a whole bunch, I had 10, okay? But the other main reasons are that, for one thing, Trump's going to by far have the most delegates, almost certainly very close to 1,237. Now, this is if it's open. He actually has a pretty good shot, I think, especially if he runs the table in New York and does extremely well in Pennsylvania. He has a good chance to get that 1,237 and just lock this up. Even if he doesn't, though, he's going to be very close. He's going to by far have, one, more delegates, and two, by far, he's going to have more votes than any of the other candidates, okay? And he has made it clear recently that he now does not think he's being treated. He's gone back on pledges, as have the other candidates, that they were all going to support whoever gets a nomination, because it's just gotten kind of ugly and people really don't like each other at this point. And if they deny Trump the nomination after he gets the most votes by far and the most delegates by far, he and his people are going to revolt. He'll form a third party, as he's indicated he would. And he's going to take a heck of a lot of his voters with him. Who knows, maybe almost all, depending on how bad the situation is. And under those circumstances, you have basically 6 consequences to him being denied the nomination. One, Democrat almost certainly is in the White House. In this case, it's Hillary Clinton. Okay, and the Republicans really don't like Hillary Clinton, and they're not going to want to see her win. All right. Even more important to Republicans than that, though, the party is going to be destroyed. All right. If there's a revolt and you have a third party and they break away, on both sides, there's going to be a lot of bad blood, and they're not going to be happy. They are not going to be happy about the way things went down. You have a huge portion of non-Trump voters saying, wow, we really can't vote for Trump, and we couldn't support him if he got the nomination. And not as many, but, a lot of Trump voters were saying the same thing about Ted Cruz. And so you've got, that situation where the party would be destroyed. And you have to think about why, and I went into that thing with the delegates also, but you've got a lot of elections coming up where in very pro-Trump territory, where if the local congressman, local governor, mayor, what have you, senator, doesn't go and support Trump, they're going to lose a lot of support within the Republican Party, and they will be very vulnerable against Democrats or even the third Trump party slate. And a lot of these people are going to have to jump ship. And these people are not the most selfless, sacrificial people. They're going to do what their polling is going to tell them will keep them in office, because that's what most politicians do. I'm not saying all these politicians. There's certainly people like decent, principled people like Mitt Romney and Lindsey Graham, for example, okay? But I don't expect most of these office holders to act like them. They're going to go where the wind goes. And so you're going to see a big defection from a significant number of Republicans. They're going to follow Trump where he's done very well, in the areas very loyal to the Republican Party in the South. And that's going to be a fracture. And then this is where we go back to the other parties other than Republicans and Democrats. You've got Gary Johnson, the Libertarian Party, who recently polled at 11%. Well, guess what, folks? If you get 15% in polling average, that means you get to be on the debate stage with the main candidates, just like Ross Perot back in 1992 with Clinton and George H.W. Bush. So the Republican Party really splits. You're going to have these hardcore libertarians who are currently within that Republican caucus. At least some of them are going to go to Johnson. And I'd be shocked if the Republican Party split and he didn't get up to 15%. And then all of a sudden we've got 4 parties. You've got the Democratic Party, you've got the Republican Party proper, you've got the Trump Party breakoff, and you've got the Libertarian Party. It's quite interesting to see what Rand Paul does under those circumstances as well, and who he supports. Or Ron Paul, and maybe they support different people. Who knows? Okay? So that's a 4th party, right? So, that's one factor. Another factor to think about is that most of the establishment Republicans haven't really taken sides. They might not like Trump, but they're certainly not actively, publicly opposing him. Ted Cruz, John Kasich have incredibly small numbers of governors, congressmen, and senators endorsing them. Most of these Republican Party leaders are staying out of the fight. They're staying in the sidelines. If they're going to get involved now, hey, wake-up call. Now's the time to do it. If Trump wins 95 delegates in New York and doesn't lose 20 or 30 to his opposition, but really crushes, it's going to be that much harder to stop him from getting 1,237 delegates. And now's the time for these people to be doing something, and you know what? They're not doing it, and that's because they're not going to do it, right? Trump's already at 742 delegates. If he wins 95 from New York, and that doesn't even include the other states coming up in a week, if he wins 95 delegates from New York, that's going to put him at about 830, with a lot more delegates to be awarded within a week. I mean, you could really see him getting the nomination if he just blows out in New York, okay? And by getting the nomination, I mean getting the nomination outright. So you have the very obvious truth, which is not being talked about, that, yeah, there's a vocal minority that are really going against Trump within the establishment. Most of them are resigned to him. We saw that with the way the debate went, where everyone was polite and kind of looking ahead and not trying to have things go too bad. And, so the underreported story right now is that the establishment is basically already decided to sit out. And that means they're resigned to Trump. They're looking at the writing on the wall. The more delusional people aren't, okay? And then, as I mentioned, delegates, they want to have a future in the party, too. They don't want to face the wrath of Trump's very angry voters. He's got the angriest and the most loyal and the most passionate voters of any of the candidates. That's important to remember as well. And then, given what we've seen the last few months, and the language and the rhetoric and everything, and the way that has played out with Trump rallies, there have been some violent incidents, more than just a few. It's been a pattern. And I can tell you, these are not the most well-adjusted people. These are people who are very upset. These are a lot of people who are struggling. There could very well be violent riots, and maybe even worse, if Trump's denied the nomination. And all those reasons are things that I meant. The destruction of the party, seeing Hillary Clinton win, those are all important reasons why Trump is still very likely to get the nomination, regardless of whether it's an open contested convention or not. I really don't think they're going to take someone who got between 40 and 50% of the votes and/or delegates and give the nomination to someone who won 15 to 20% or less, or someone who didn't even run. I have a hard time believing that. This is an era where populism is really on the rise. That would destroy the party. However, the one crazy situation where there's a shot is Bernie Sanders doesn't play nice. Bernie Sanders gets delusions of grandeur, and he decides not to support Hillary Clinton when she gets the nomination. He's going to take his supporters with him. Then you're going to have 5 parties. You're going to have the Democratic Party with Clinton. You're going to have some sort of socialist party with Sanders on the left. On the right, you're going to have Republicans. You're going to have the Trump Party and the Libertarian Party. That's 5 parties on the stage. That's a whole interesting can of worms. And you know what? In theory, it could be great. It could be just what America needs. In practice, way too much is at stake. And in a 5-party situation, Trump has way too good a chance for my liking. Yeah, I'm coming out there and saying I don't like Trump. I also can't stand Cruz, to be honest. But that's a whole other podcast I could get into with just him. But anyway, now let's transition to the Democratic side. So this is interesting in that it's pretty obvious what's going on. And it's frustrating because everyone understands this but Bernie supporters. Some of them are smart and they have brains and use them. Others are just all heart and hope, and it's cute, okay? But this is politics. This isn't Bambi or Pollyanna. This is politics. Politics is about the art of the possible here and now. And I've really gotten frustrated with Sanders. Full disclosure, I'm a Clinton supporter. Because, look, he keeps saying, oh, we're running an issues campaign. We're we're taking the high road and whatever. His entire campaign is built on denigrating Hillary Clinton. Why would you choose me? Because Hillary Clinton's corrupt. Because Hillary Clinton takes money from Wall Street, therefore she's owned by Wall Street. You can't trust her, but you can trust me because I don't take money from Wall Street. She's part of a corrupt campaign finance system. You can't fix anything if she's the candidate because she's part of the problem, because she's a slave to the system. And you know what? It's just, he doesn't say all this explicitly, but believe me, you listen to him anytime he's speaking, those are his clear implications. And a lot of his surrogates are not shy about being direct, where Sanders himself implies. And my favorite line from one of the debates earlier was, he kept talking about how she got money from this group and that group, and she's like, well, you know what, Sarah Sanders, if you got someone to say it, say something. Basically saying, if you're going to say I'm corrupt, say it, because you want to look at my voting record, it's very good. I've stood up to these interests. They want to give me money, fine. Maybe they think I'm going to do a good job, whatever. I mean, you can't look at my record and say anywhere where I've sold out the people I've been fighting for my whole life just because I got a donation from Goldman Sachs, okay? And that's totally fair, you have different types of candidates. You have candidates who take money and, sure, they let that person have a seat at the table. They've got access and an audience, but that doesn't mean that you do their bidding. And look at Obama, right? Hundreds of thousands for his campaign from Citigroup, and Obama fined them billions. Well, that doesn't work the way Sanders explained things, and actually nothing works the way Sanders explains things. Everything for him is all about the corruption and the moneyed elites and the concentration of wealth. And if you just deal with Wall Street and the richest 1% and punitively tax them and break up the big banks and just go class warfare all out, everything else, racial injustice, jobs, you name it, it's all going to work out because the main issue is inequality. And once you deal with that, everything else falls into place, which is nonsense. Yes, inequality is a huge issue, but you don't fix racial injustice by breaking up the big banks. That's not going to stop police brutality, for example. Corrupt campaign finance is not why Trayvon Martin got shot. There are factors that overlap, but that's not, and you can understand why African Americans hear his narrow focus and say, that's not enough for me. And frankly, African American voters have shown themselves to be more mature, reasonable voters this cycle than white voters. White voters who are either going mainly for Trump or for Sanders. And with all due respect to these white people, they don't have the background and struggles that African Americans do. African Americans have heard white people make all kinds of crazy promises and not deliver. And this is the story of the black experience, is that, if slavery's over, we're going to free you, and things are going to be better, and this and that, and, segregation's going to end, everything's going to be good, and you know what, there's just all these problems that plague the black community, and some things have to do with issues within the black community's culture, but those themselves are even really the result of these horrible conditions they've been thrown under since the founding of our nation and even before that. And Bernie Sanders doesn't know how to talk about those issues, and he doesn't really try. He just throws a token line here and there and tries to link it to his inequality, wealthy as 1%, Wall Street's evil shtick. And, these black voters, Latino voters as well, they know that things are more complicated than that. And Hillary does too. And, it's complicated. I can't tell you about. I can't offer you free college, but I can help you refinance your student loan debt. Well, that's not as sexy. If you go to Syracuse University, where Bernie was a couple hours ago, and give a big speech and say free college, everyone's going to go, woo! Hillary's like, I can't offer you free college, but let's work on reducing your interest on your state. Well, these 18-year-olds don't know they're pardon the expression, their head from their ass, frankly. Everyone thinks they know everything when they're 18, and then, that's not to say that these people aren't smart, but there's clearly a dominance of left-wing activists, quote-unquote alternate media that's taken a hold of a lot of dorm rooms and college campuses and what have you. I don't think they're reading the New York Times and Bloomberg The Economist the same way. I know people were when I was in college. I think they're reading Alternet and Truth Out and all these other sources. Anyway, so, I just, Bernie's whole thing is just, I have slogans, I have ideas. I'm going to say things that you like. And I like them too. And we're going to just say things that we like. And if we say things that we like enough, that's just going to happen. And when people press you and ask you how it's going to happen, you say, we're going to have a political revolution. And it's just, what nonsense, honestly. I mean, the history of America is, unfortunately, even if you want to look at the abolition of slavery, which is the most intense, significant thing we've ever done domestically in terms of policy, that was a very gradual thing over the course of a bloody war, I might add. And even in Europe, he keeps talking about single-payer healthcare. If we're the only country in the developed world that whatever doesn't do this and that. Well, you know what? It took these systems decades to evolve overseas as well. So, I'm sorry, but the Bernie Sanders voter to me is just someone who's lazy, not engaged in the process, lazy intellectually. Not these people aren't hardworking or whatever, but they're lazy in that they think they cannot be involved in the process, not pay attention, not be engaged, not come out and vote in midterms, and then blame the system when Congress falls under the sway of the Tea Party because they didn't freaking vote, okay, in midterm elections. When that happens, then they blame the system on all the other Democrats that survived those elections, as if somehow, they can control the Tea Party. And if only they had been more progressive and more liberal, nonsense. The Tea Party rose in response to the hysterical reaction of Republicans to Obamacare, to the Affordable Care Act. So anyway, Bernie's absurd notion that if we just get more people to turn out, they'll definitely be on our side. Not necessarily, Bernie. 3 states, including his own Vermont, so I can understand how he doesn't get it, because he's from one of these 3 states. There are 3 states out of 50 where there are more liberals than conservatives. The other 47 states have more conservatives than liberals, and I can tell you, even with those 3 states, the margins are much greater on the more conservative side. Okay? Bernie thinks that these people in these other 47 states are going to want socialized, single-payer, government-run healthcare. They're going to want to be taxed highly for free college, and they're going to be wanting taxed highly to take healthcare and put it in the government's hands. And we're talking middle-class taxes, not just... He's been very clear about that. Yes, the wealthy will pay more and the corporations will pay more, but it's going to be a significant tax increase on middle-class Americans. And their trust in government's already pretty low. What they're magically going to trust because of Sanders. And then this doesn't even get into whether or not he can pass any of this stuff through a Congress that's just going to laugh at him. But anyway, for him to be denigrating Hillary Clinton for trying as a woman who's been active for decades in politics when feminism wasn't as cool back then as it is now, where she was called a radical because she wanted, universal health care coverage back in the 90s. To fault her for playing the game, playing the donor circuit, getting money from the sources that candidates have traditionally got money to win, when she as a woman really did not have any alternative back in the year 2000 when she ran for Senate. Okay? I just think it's a low blow, right? And to keep insinuating that she's corrupt, you don't like the system, Bernie, we get it, and that's a fair point. But to try and paint Clinton as some stooge of the system when she's actually one of the most progressive, hard-fighting Democrats we've ever had in this country, gets, and now he's saying he's not qualified. And then he keeps walking it back, but then he says it again. He's running, in some ways it's different. Yeah, he's not getting super PAC money, fine, and that's a big deal, okay? But in other ways, he's running a pretty traditional, normal politician's campaign. Yeah, he's not saying crazy stuff like Trump. He's not getting in the gutter like Cruz and other people were before, Rubio on the Republican side. That doesn't mean that his tactics are great just because he's not behaving like Trump. And I really don't like the way he's treated Hillary Clinton. So anyway, this race, I'm sorry, it's already over. It's been over. He's not going to catch up to her in pledged delegates. He's so far behind. Let me just put this into perspective for you, okay? and we're going to end this pretty quickly. I wanted to keep this a little shorter. You have 9 states. Bernie's won, I think, about 16 states at this point. You've had 9 states of Bernie's that he won. Okay? Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, Wyoming, Hawaii, Alaska, Nebraska, Idaho, and Utah. Okay? Actually, I think it's 10. Hold on. We have Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Hawaii, Alaska, Nebraska, Idaho, Utah, anyway, okay. And Wyoming. Yes, 9 states. You have 9 states there that total 215 delegates. He won all those states. And he won a few others. But that's a huge portion of the states he's won. One state that Hillary won, Florida, 214 delegates. So one state that she won by a huge margin. Total delegates are 214 delegates. 9 states that Bernie won, total delegates 215. So everyone's like, oh, he won 8 out of 9 states. Yeah, he won states like Utah and Hawaii and Alaska and Idaho and Wyoming. Those are all among the 8 of the last 9 states he's won. The only very impressive state he won in that stretch that he's come out where he just won a whole bunch of states is Washington State. And he did win a lot of delegates there. But the bad news for Bernie is that Washington State is the largest state like that, that's fertile ground for him, that was left. That's it. Yes, he's going to do well. He should win in Oregon, okay? But look, doesn't have as many delegates as Washington. Washington, look, it was his best chance to gain a bunch of delegates and to gain on Hillary Clinton. And he did. She was up by about 300. When you add all these other states he's won now, she's up by about 200. But you know what? It's that margin is going to go right back up because she's going to beat him in New York. She's way up in Pennsylvania. Actually, no, it's been closer in Pennsylvania. But look, she's about to do well in New York. Her polls are going up there. These other states, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Maryland, look, they're all very fertile territory for him. It's going to go back. And he doesn't have a way to win the nomination. And now he kept saying how bad superdelegates were and undemocratic they are. Now he's trying to win them to his side. It's just like, look, with me and Bernie, stick to your issues. Stop attacking Hillary. Stop implying she's corrupt. Stick to your issues. I'm not telling you get out of the race. I'm not saying don't sound off on the things that you're good at sounding off on. But stop attacking her. Stop weakening her in the eyes of so many of your supporters who are going to have to support her if we're going to win this election. And frankly, a lot of them have already said they're not going to. So you need to be aware of this. You need to put the damn party ahead of your own ambitions, which is ironic because your campaign manager said Hillary would have to do that. Hillary's way up in votes. She's got 2.4 million more votes. That's about to go way up now that you've got states like New York and Pennsylvania that are going to vote for her. So look, it's going to be a little bit ugly. But Bernie really is the good man that he says he is in terms of taking the high road in campaign. He's going to lay off on some of his attacks. This debate's going to be crucial, by the way. I think she's going to have her best debate, frankly. I think she knows it's at stake, and she's not going to be holding back as much the same way she has before. Neither is he, but I think she's going to come out better. I think she's been kind of fighting him with one hand tied behind her back for a while, and I think this could be a knockout blow. He's out. He just doesn't know it, but he's stumbling around and causing problems and taking wild punches at Hillary. He's going to get knocked out this round, and he'll still, they're not going to call the match. They're not going to call the fight, but I think with this New York debate and then the New York primary, the debate in 2 days, the primary in 9 days, it's going to be very, very clear what's going to happen after that. And within a week from that, you're going to see all these other states that she's going to win. And, Bernie's, the tolerance for him and his negativity and his attacking personally Hillary, is going to really drop within the establishment. And you're going to see a lot more people coming out for Hillary and against Bernie if he tries to continue it the way he has. So anyway, there we go. Those are my thoughts. But so, like I've been saying for, over a month now, since about mid-February, since South Carolina for the Republicans and Nevada for the Democrats, I've been saying it's clearly going to be Trump and Clinton. And Sanders, to his credit, has really given the best possible campaign he could have in some ways. His people are, oh, we should have attacked her earlier. Then his shiny new, I'm not like other politicians brand wouldn't have been as strong, so he wouldn't have done as well if he had started off that negative. He's done as well as he could have, and it's 40% or less of Democratic voters. That's not enough to win the nomination. Trump, on the other hand, could win the nomination with just 40%, but I think he's going to actually get more than that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Let me know what you think. You can always contact me. My information is available on this podcast on the screen. You can look up my name, Brian Freidenborg, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. LinkedIn, especially. Thanks for listening, and have fun with these elections. Hopefully they're not too painful to watch, because sometimes I actually have to remind myself I care about this country and I love it, and I want to just gouge my eyes, ears, and all my senses out so that I don't have to taste, feel, touch, hear, smell, see anything involving Trump, Cruz, or at this point Sanders either, who definitely he's way better than Trump and Cruz, but my goodness. I'd probably vote for him over John Kasich, but I can't be certain. But I probably would. But I actually like John Kasich a lot. But I have problems with his defunding of Planned Parenthood. I mean, he's still a Republican, right? He's not a liberal Republican. He's a moderate Republican. He's not a liberal Republican. Poor John Kasich deserves a nomination, but I think he will surprise a lot of people, though. Kasich will catch up to Cruz or come close. And then Bernie's been done for a while, but he and his fans just don't know it. So look, lose gracefully and with dignity. And just like Hillary Clinton officially nominated Barack Obama, Bernie, play team ball. Don't drag the party down with you as you lose. Anyway, thank you all, and till next time.